Michael Schaefer, Ross Johnson, Matt Schultz, and Landon Fry are all here this evening. Free.
I'm just gonna say it. I've been thinking it for 10 minutes. I don't want a podcast scared.
Oh yeah.
Ashes. Now I've seen the road.
Pregnancy is a beautiful thing. Pregnancy is a gift.
Shit. Oh, there are stories to tell.
What kind of paint sticks to asteroids? Like, if you don't prime your wall.
Afraid some days, but the road will lead us to a better place.
We are called to emerge from that default setting of self-involvement.
We are go for launch.
It is, in fact, Thursday.
And the short man
Thursday
is
is the
not
day.
very large bars.
Just the three and not the one.
He is a short man with short sound waves. Okay, second last episode of 2024. That's hard to believe.
That's wild.
We got Matt Schultz hosting, Matt Charles Schultz, of course, co-creator of Snoopy in 1954. And he's going to be taking things over in the Speeches by Dad series, following up Ross and I with Act Like You've Been There Before by Doug Johnson. And last episode, the very raw speech excerpt called Lucy from Father Mike Schmitz. Matt, what do we got tonight?
So it's a speech officially titled Citizen in a Republic. Most people know it as the Man in the Arena speech by Theodore Roosevelt. It was delivered in Paris on April 23rd, 1910 at the Sorbonne University. It was probably early PT school, late college that I first got really into him. It was definitely inspired by The Art of Manliness and a lot of their just coverage or promotion, and just hearing some of the stories of his life through there initially. And then I read like a really extensive biography. It was like 800 pages and it was just pre-presidency. But it was like a 3-part series. It was Theodore something. The middle one was Theodore Rex. That was him as king, and then Theodore something else. I forget. Anyhow, but yeah, he's someone who I've admired and have come to I think critique a little bit too, which we'll kind of get into later. But I think he's just a fascinating person to, and I think just an interesting life to view fatherhood through. There have been kind of a few like just movements in my heart recently. So, excuse me, Mike, I'll just mention like the speech that you picked, like I've really been ruminating on it. So anyway, it's kind of lingered in its effect. There's also a book called A Father's Tale that I read recently by Michael D. O'Brien. That's kind of been just a few different things have had me like confronting different habits I've developed in different ways. I found myself being maybe more passive and complacent. So I think Teddy Roosevelt was anything but that. And I think a good character to kind of, shake things up a bit, someone to muse on. So, and without further ado, I'll read an excerpt. And it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows at the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who never know victory nor defeat. Shame on the man of cultivated taste, permits refinement to develop into fastidiousness that unfits him for doing the rough work of a workaday world. Yep. The speech itself is covers a lot, so it's a really broad, encompassing speech. Which, I'll be curious to hear kind of a variety of thoughts from you guys on. So whether it was that excerpt in particular, or just other thoughts on the speech, what were your guys' first thoughts on wrestling with this?
What Matt was referencing originally, like the lost episodes, there's probably about a year's worth of episodes from hard COVID year 2020 that I don't know what happened to them, but that's okay because they weren't very good. So that's what this episode was done.
This was the first
I was
one.
Probably recording.
I think this was the first one. Ross picked it, and yeah.
So I was recording in a McDonald's parking lot.
Oh, wow.
To use their internet.
I remember that. Holy crap.
Yeah. So honestly, my first reaction, I'll say it sounds funny, but it's also true. I was thinking to myself, like, another old white guy. And I'm not even like trying to be funny, but like, and it's also calling the kettle black because I chose a white guy for my speech. But it's like I do look at our podcast and it's like it's all white men, and it's like it'd be nice to have some diversity. But regardless, I did read the entire speech. I'm really curious what maybe one is like what Teddy Roosevelt would have been like as a father. That's maybe something I was thinking about. A little did you know fact, reading the book D-Day by Stephen Ambrose, his son or grandson was at D-Day and was killed in the war. Not at D-Day, but a little bit after that. I think his son. So that would seem to imply that his son, at least, it wasn't Kermit, who is a subject of River of Doubt, I think. But that seems to imply his sons may receive this message well. Yeah, just thinking about how boys or children who would be just a little bit less naturally stoic or attracted to sort of the disciplined life, how they would receive his thoughts. Let me think. Any other first reactions? Probably not as prepared well as ordinarily here, but and I'd suppose the other big thought is feeling a little bit self-conscious, feeling called out for some of these things. I guess maybe specifically like what you read. It's all sort of there, but his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. It's like, admittedly, I feel a little bit like I feel called out there. I was never in the military. Boy, that would have been bold. I'm a project manager for DNS drilling and never ran hard enough to qualify for the Olympic marathon trials. That had been a goal earlier in my life. It's definitely not going to happen now. So those are sort of the first reactions. Naked, inspired, and wondering about his sons.
My first reaction, I was excited to go back, and I'm glad you repicked it. I think I enjoyed the speech the first time around. So I listened to the full when you click over to YouTube and bring up just the full audio. Someone read it. Clocks in at 1 hour. If we were to choose one speech about how to one speech can go on the books, and it has to define how to reestablish the most American-like society for future potential longevity or success. I think this is the best speech by an American president, bar none. I don't even all other speech, inaugurations or whatnot are just more policy based, or why America should be a country, or we just fought this war and etc. This is just the most like first principles, fundamental. Here's how to structure a society that best enables the form of republic governance. Republic governance that we often just call democracy. And I think that he goes really deep into all of the supporting factions that are mostly probably start at the family and the level of education of the citizens that blossom into a thriving, democratic republic. So,
But I mean, in terms of why I picked the speech, I feel like that has a lot to do with or overlap with like my first thoughts. Just and Mike, I know you used the word called out. I think shaken up is another, or like I don't know, like you imagine like the scene in a movie where they grab someone by the shoulders and like snap out of it, and they just kind of rattle someone loose of whatever is binding them. And I feel like, there have just been just a few things, like I mentioned, that one speech that Mike picked, and the book Father's Tale, just a few things that just, had me reconsider, like, okay, like actually I have been becoming complacent. I have been, what was the word that Father Mike Schmitz kind of redefined? I'm having a brain fart in the speech. Just about indifference. Yeah. So like, be indifference, not being, not feeling, but not feeling enough to act, or not, or something to that effect. Where action, it kind of makes you less indifferent, and not, you're just moved in some way. I mean, the portion I read and the portion that gets
Matt, can you maybe set up the context for this speech a little bit more clearly? So, I mean, Roosevelt's in France. It's 1910. Is he still president? Is he post-president? Is he trying to pull the first Trump of being president and then not being president and then being president again?
So this is, he did eventually try to do that. So Theodore Roosevelt was first elected. So so he served as vice president so that was the 1900 election. He was a vice president for Harrison, I believe, if I remember right.
William McKinley.
I'm sorry,
He's William McKinley's vice president. McKinley had 4 years. He won the second term. So they're about a year into McKinley's second term. McKinley was assassinated.
Right.
And Teddy took over early in that.
Right. So Teddy's first, so Teddy had one term, I guess that partial, but most of that term. He won re-election, so he had his 2 terms. He did not run a third, and I believe he made some promises that he wouldn't run a third election just to avoid accusations of tyranny. But eventually,
it was ambiguous. And in the 04 race, he just said, because if I win this, I'll have like 7 years. I will not run again, even though I perhaps could.
Right. So anyway, so he does win the 1904 election. So as president, the election of 1908, he is when he bows out, and that's when William Taft is elected. This speech was given in 1910, so this is shortly after his presidency is over. He just got done touring Africa and Europe, shooting elephants and all sorts of big game. The Republican Party is in a little bit of disarray at this point in time, or maybe not disarray, but it's kind of starting to faction a little bit. And Roosevelt's starting to kind of get back on the public stage, I guess. So, yeah, basically in 1912, he does run for the presidency again in his own party. So it's like some people call it the Progressive Party, other people call it the Bull Moose Party. It's kind of gotten a few nicknames, I guess, but yeah, so we're kind of between those two. He did not win that election. In fact, he probably just won that election for Woodrow Wilson by drawing a lot of votes away from, I forget who the other guy was. But anyhow, was it Taft? Was Taft running for re-election? Okay. Anyhow, so that's kind of the general context here. So he's out of the presidency. I don't know. I suppose no one knows what was going on in his mind, if he was using this as a way to just stay on the stage in case he ran again, or what it was. But yeah, that's kind of the general context for the speech. But it's given to students in France at Sorbonne University, which is one of the preeminent, universities in France. With that being said, I think the part about the critic, it's not the critic who counts, being such a prominent line, but I think especially because he does give this to students in France. Do you? I guess, do you see like intellect and philosophizing? I mean, just to call ourselves out here, we're prone to doing this sort of stuff. Does this distract us from the real work? Are we kind of uniquely prone to avoiding the arena by this sort of stuff?
What's the quote that you're riffing off of there? Read the quote again.
So it is not the critic who counts. It is not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of good deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, comes up short again and again. Cynical habit of thought and speech, a readiness to criticize work which the critic himself never tries to perform, an intellectual aloofness which will not accept contact with life's realities. All these are marks, not as the professor would feign to think, of superiority, but of weakness. They mark the men unfit to bear their part painfully in the stern strife of living, who seek, in the affection of contempt for achievements of others, to hide from others and from themselves in their own weakness. Probably the most direct out of academics.
Yeah, one aspect of, what was your question again then?
I guess, do you see that as like a real tendency? Like, do we fall into that tendency of just like thinking and philosophizing at the expense of doing, or
Yeah. I think we do. There was another part of the speech that made me call forward an answer to this that I thought was really interesting. I'll read it. This everyone who is not cursed with this pride of being the closet philosopher, which I thought I was intrigued by, like the closet philosopher, which is almost basically the nature of this podcast. We're all in our closets.
I mean, I'm in my basement, philosophy. All right, not my closet.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. I think that describes us. The difference being, and then he goes on to say, like, he gets into like living on isolated farms and hamlets and the nature of water drainage, municipality agreements, and then that quickly jumps into the socialism versus individualism being pointless. I don't know how the gap is bridged, but I know we want to talk about that later. But I just, the closet philosopher made me closest philosopher. Yeah. Not thinking too much within yourself, but being connected with others and at least sharing your ideas and partaking in the community is really important.
I do not think that we closet philosophize too much relative to our material contribution and thinking. I mean, none of us are still living in the Focus Men's House past our years in college, right? Maybe I'm the closest one to that, being unmarried in an apartment, but I do have a job, as discussed earlier. I mean, I think that we all actually do. I'll go a little bit further and to say I think we all do a pretty good job. And it's, of course, not arbitrary either. It's not like it's just about being balanced. No, I mean, I think that both, inform the other.
Sure.
Right. And that is something that I sense that maybe a dichotomy or false difference or something, like growing up is, you sensed, well, there's the religious people and there's the non-religious people, right? Religious and being a euphemism for philosophy here as well, since they sort of overlap. Sure. And so that is something that I did want to do well is, because if you can't figure out how to bridge that gap, then the world can't be saved, right? Because if the only way to be saved is in the religious life, then it's pretty bleak outlook. So
I think you've got some good points there in terms of I don't mean I think this has been it was a good kind of I guess one thing among many, like I mentioned, that's kind of just been a good, like, all right, you just got to shake things up here or there and kind of just double check yourself and kind of examine what it is that you're doing to just make sure we're avoiding that, because I can certainly tend toward that, right? Like I know you guys are very well aware of my PT nihilism, right? It's very easy to critique PT theories out there, but it's like, well, I also haven't contributed any novel ones in their place, So I think just professionally, I know that's something I tend towards. That it's like, maybe using some of that energy to build something up might be a better thing. I think also, especially just having been more settled, have 2 kids, third on the way. By the way, our third's going to be a girl. So that's exciting. So baby girl in the Schultz family coming up. So where was I going before that? Just being more settled. Like I find it way easier to just kind of exchange to the comfortable pleasantries than to try to really put yourself out there and get to know new people. I always used to be much more of an extrovert than an introvert, but I've definitely found that, and again, it's not inherently a bad thing to be an introvert, but I feel like I'm becoming that out of laziness, not out of like a true personality shift, which just takes discernment and whatnot, kind of seeing if that's the case. But I think there's also just been, I feel like I can think myself out of motivation at times. I guess one example, like I've got a few different like writing projects I've kind of started doing in the past and have kind of picked up here or there, and I find myself like just thinking about like, oh, well, is AI is going to make writing useless? Like no one's going to need any content generators, at this stage because AI is just going to do it. So why waste my time? Or, there's all sorts of like kind of big picture abstract things you could think about that in my case have actually like kept me from just kind of diving into something new like that, like this, like a new writing project of some sort. I think there's a real temptation.
That's surprising, honestly, to hear you say that.
The AI thing, or
what about surprise? Which part?
the AI thing and you choosing not to write certain things because you feel like AI makes it what's what I'm looking for, irrelevant or
obsolete,
obsolete.
or
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I think that, and that's whereas I think a less rational version of myself might have just gone ahead and done it. And yeah, who knows? Maybe something like that would stick, um, but anyway, yeah, I think there is a real temptation, that I think this has helped me acknowledge, and um, but at the same time, not to be like too hard on ourselves, like you mentioned, Mike. I think we are doing a decent job, and I think your prayer and your thought, I think maybe um, better aims, or better kind of conserves your action. Like you're not going to be chasing random ideas and or random actions, and just doing things just to do them. Like I think we are more thoughtful in what we do, and yeah, I guess there's pros and cons, and it does actually require some discernment, but not be afraid to get shaken up by the ghost of Theodore Roosevelt here or there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything in particular you guys find that keeps you from entering the arena? Like is there anything you hide behind? Is there anything that really anything that keeps you from jumping in and kind of making your thoughts more of a reality?
I mean, for me, I think it's mostly self-consciousness, worrying about what certain people think. Yeah, I mean, so I'm in a new job and work, and the blue collar industry, which I've participated in, it's an environment where jumping in has not always come naturally to me. I mean, it's still rewarding to go through the process and learn, but yeah, it doesn't come naturally for various reasons. Yeah, and then the other aspect of it, self-consciousness, worried about how certain people, feeling like I need to reflect a certain expectation. And even if that expectation is not one that I am happy with, still feeling like I need to fulfill that in some peculiar way. So yeah, those would be the two things in the personal and professional life that sort of keep me out of the arena and on the sidelines.
There was a quote I thought of. I had to look up who it was attributed to and exactly how it went. But I've Googled two things here in the last couple minutes as we've spoken and broke this down. First was that quote, which is the three most harmful addictions are heroin, carbohydrates, and a monthly salary. Nassim Taleb, he's kind of a modern, I think he's secular. He's written several books on a wide range of topics, from financial markets to philosophical kind of first principles. But I've definitely heard that one before and thought of it here. I think it does apply to the nature of man in the arena. I think there is a being reliant on a boss and an employer and a monthly salary has just a natural, you're not the man in the arena when you are tied to those things. And then the other thing I quickly asked the AI was just like, what was the employment market in 1910, and so it was still like 40% farmers, 40%. There was vast industrialization happening. So, even, there was a pretty heavy depression in the early 1890s. McKinley got elected. He threw down a bunch of tariffs, and the economy did take off. Got assassinated. Teddy took it, but vast industrialization, still a ton of farmers. And then that, I think the rest would be more in the sole proprietor, shopkeeper portion. Yeah. Which I do when I think of the essence of the man in the arena and the most famous part of the speech. I do think that it evokes to more of the Jeffersonian farmer, yeoman, shopkeeper, sole proprietor,
right,
lane of the American dream, rather than W-2, 40 hours, factory line, wage labor aspect of the industrial society. I think that, and I don't even think that we really talk about it anymore. I think that Teddy is talking about it here. And
talking about what exactly? Just to
the perhaps like the negative aspects of
industrialized
employment. I think
society.
It's generally like seen as good and stable and safe, and perhaps agreeably so, like family focused. But it's not what Teddy's getting at and what he's trying to proselytize here. Which is a very different society and citizenry that in their daily life control their own time and work and contribution, and that multiplied up to a whole nation makes a strong whole nation rather than a subservient citizenry to
a comfortable yeah interesting. And I think, there's so many. I like that you bring in the market aspect of that, because that's something that I've heard some people are just have been critical of 401ks kind of for that reason. It kind of locks people into that sort of world, where if you don't have a 401k, you can't retire. Obviously there are other strategies you might be able to use financially, but I mean the 401k, especially if your employer matches, is like such a strong. It puts you in a very it's hard to leave that, and it does kind of stagnate. I could see it stagnating, if not economically, certainly could stagnate the human spirit.
Correct. Yeah.
It's way easier to hide in a big organization and not do anything meaningful, and just try to and not feel that impetus to make a big change, than it would be if you were calling the shots and things did rely on you a little bit more heavily,
Right. Yeah. I've even seen you mentioned 401k, and along the lines of what Teddy's alluding to, and even back to perhaps what's a Christian way to interpret it. I saw a fairly well written out blog Twitter post by a writer who's a devout Catholic, I believe, and
is it Jacob Imam? Is that his name?
No, I think it's Hickman or
sure. Either way, that's right.
Yeah, and it basically was like, show me the Bible verse that supports like 401ks. Like, who's supposed to store up a bunch of money for like 30 years from now? It's like, trust in God and live your day to day, and like you're not supposed to hoard for a much later time you don't even know you're going to get. And that struck me as like that, I think it's so easy to be like, 401k and save and be prudent and stash it away and you need your job to get that. And it's like, maybe not actually, and that intrigued me. I had never even heard like the counter to 401k 6% saving.
Right.
I think it is, the water we swim in that may not be how mid Book of Acts Christian body would think.
But I hear you. But to be the devil's advocate, we live in a world, at least Western world, where living to 85 or 90 is reasonable.
Sure.
And Teddy Roosevelt, of course, died like a lot of people when he was in his early 60s at that time. And it's also easy to say that, well, don't store up things from the comfort of our podcast and when we have to work now regardless. But when you've got crappy health late in life, I'm not rebutting. I'm more rebutting against this other guy, because it's like, it's gonna get you clicks, it's gonna get you a certain audience for your podcast.
Sure.
So I'm just a little bit skeptical of people who make bold claims like that on the podcast or on podcasts,
right?
Sort of climate that we're in right now.
I will take that.
But I get it. I get it because I'm thinking of the parable of the man in the barn.
Yeah, for sure. And I think,
and I even just to counter.
Go ahead,
Matt. Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, no. I want to hear what you have to say, Landon.
Just to quickly counter it, and I totally agree. We live in a place that to swim against the current, it would look weird, and maybe you're not even valuing life if you don't value. But I remember listening to a Wendell Berry debate where his opponent was talking about basically progressive modern, our death rate's much older, we live so much longer, and he was just like, why is the age of average death as a statistic, like, why does that matter at all? Like, who cares if you die at 60 or 80? If those 80 years were something, it's like, and he said it a lot better. I'm probably not doing it justice, but we definitely do have a concept of like, you must live as long as possible and take advantage of everything. And, if the value or the life in that life is sacrificed in any way, then sure, it could be better.
I feel like there's a few things that Teddy brings up in this speech that could kind of elucidate some stuff there too. But I know one way, or like so this is actually a thought I had about like, why is the arena overrated, right? Or what would actually be an argument against the arena itself, And I think some of the things you mentioned kind of elucidate some of this. So like, I think of like the eulogy principle, right? And there's people use this for, whether it's business settings or just family life, but basically, like what's going to look better and sound better in your eulogy, like, oh, well, he got promoted to senior vice manager of whatever, or like, loving husband, father, he really had this meaningful interaction with me when he coached my high school football team. He told me, act like I've been there before, right? When I scored a touchdown, like, all right. So like, those are the things that get remembered, and I guess whether you're in the arena, I guess maybe that's the arena, and to some degree, like 401ks and this sort of financial security allows you to, like, I'm very grateful that I can just leave work and not think about it because I'm not the sole proprietor of the PT clinic, and just interact with my boys and just love them and, wrestle with them and goof around. Um, and there is uh, I guess maybe there's a different arena you're fighting in, um, or you're entering into, uh, by virtue of some of these comforts, but that's where like you just need to be, uh, you need to like if you use those comforts selfishly, or like these amenities we have selfishly, or to so that you can really watch a lot of Netflix, or so you can really, just do this superficial thing, um, or like, yeah, like of course that's bad, um, but yeah, if you use that comfort to like, all right, now I don't have to worry about running a business. I can, teach CCD classes and coach my kids' baseball team or whatever. Um, and there's different arenas that can open up. So like, I guess as long as you're looking for an arena, um, I don't know that he's saying you have to be a huge entrepreneur, but you got to be doing something to build up. I mean, he doesn't say build up the kingdom, but like, that's what we would say, yeah, there are valid reasons not to enter certain arenas, but not to enter no arenas. That's just not a yeah. That's how republics decay and decline into nothing. Um, but which I kind of speaking of the different arenas. So like I want to. I know Mike, you mentioned earlier you're curious about how Theodore Roosevelt was as a father, right? And that's something that I had thought about too. So I just did like just a quick, I mean, just in my kind of initial search, a few of the articles I posted on the outline was nothing but glowing reviews about him as a father. Now, granted, one of them is from the Theodore Roosevelt Association, right? So maybe a little bias there. But it seems like most posts, I mean, all of these descriptions of him, in which there are a few anecdotes that I think are rather charming of him as a father. I mean, so like his own, and this is Theodore Roosevelt's own words. This isn't in this speech. This is somewhere else. To be honest, I don't know where this is quoted from, but he says, "There is no form of happiness on earth, no form of success in any kind, that in any way approaches the happiness of the husband and the wife, who are married lovers, and the father and mother of plenty of healthy children." Um, So that was his words, and there are just a few well-documented romps in the White House. I mean, he would wrestle with his boys in the Oval Office. Um, his kids brought the pony on the elevator, apparently, in the White House at one point. Um, and I guess there were several instances they had a pet snake as well, and this was um, uh, like a decently like a 4 foot long. This wasn't like a little baby garter snake that they had in a kit. This was like a 4 foot long snake that they took out and were like scaring the White House visitors with it. Like they had no idea who these people were. They were just thought it'd be fun to scare these people with a snake. But I guess those types of things just kind of suggest he's very present to his kids when he was present. But there are a handful of other issues that I guess generally had maybe some qualms with, especially just reading his biography and especially kind of revisiting some of these as a father. So yeah, I guess here's like a brief history of like kind of Theodore Roosevelt's kind of early fatherhood, I guess. So 1884, Alice is born. Soon thereafter, he begins ranching in the Dakotas, right? So he's gone for several months at a time. His wife had died I believe during childbirth, or either that or shortly after Alice was born. So his sister was raising his daughter, Alice, for the first 2 years of her life. And basically, Theodore Roosevelt is just here for a month or two at a time. And then he's gone ranching in the Dakotas. So rather, not present for his daughter's first 2 years. Somewhere in the 1886 to 87, there was severe weather that wiped out over half of his $80,000 investment. In today's money, that would have been a $2.7 million investment. So basically, he lost $1.5 million in this kind of reckless ranching endeavor that he engaged in. In 1886, he marries Edith, his second wife, and they remain married the rest of their life. So between 1886 and 1896, he had various political positions, did some ranching as well still. Serious time spent away from his family. I just remember from reading his biography, I just got the impression he just didn't have much interest in raising his kids. Like he would seem to be engaged and interested in them. Like he would bring them things. He would look forward to seeing them. But at the same time, he just seemed to be gone for rather lengthy stints. But, given his line of work, maybe that's part of the job and whatnot. But the thing that really gets me, so 1898, Spanish-American War, he's not vice president yet. So I think he was governor of New York. No, he wasn't. He was the naval secretary, I think, at the time. And so he has 5 kids. And he just decides he's going to up and fight in the Spanish-American War. His wife begged him not to go. He had several friends who begged him not to go. He had no obligation to fight. Like he wasn't an active military or anything. And he only had some National Guard experience, but not an actual deployed military experience. And he just decides he's going to just go up and fight in the Spanish-American War with 5 kids at home. And, anyway, all that is I'm not saying that to bash the guy. And so anyway, I guess all this is to say, one of the parts of his speech is work, fight, and have children.
Plenty of them.
Plenty of children. That's what he says. Yeah, that's what he says. So
plenty of healthy children.
I guess maybe with a little bit of this historical context in mind, maybe we'll back up a little bit. Maybe talk about that comment because I think that's interesting too. But so work.
Well, maybe if I can
go
comment
ahead
on your string of factoids there. Yeah, I mean, I agree. The sort of Spanish American, going off to Dakotas while your sister raises your daughter is certainly eyebrow raising to say the least. But the Spanish American going off to fight in that with, like you said, 5 kids and significant people in his life telling him not to. It's it's not like I wouldn't say that's an evil thing to do, but it is the wrong thing to do, right? Based upon all the obvious considerations there. It's really, can you it's not like this is, World War II trying to stop the Third Reich from taking over the world. I don't know much about Spanish-American War, but I don't think it was World War II. As you said, they weren't drafting 45-year-old men with 5 kids. It seems like a compulsion on his part to have gone.
Sure.
Which you can have compulsions like that and still be genuine in all these things you believe that he's preaching here, rightly so. Me, maybe more than many people know that with my various interests that, can be genuine and good and allow me to sort of connect with others in good and interesting ways, but it can probably be compulsive at times in certain ways.
We got Guam, Puerto Rico, the Philippines. We became an imperial power. We ended the Spanish Navy almost permanently and kind of got Cuba, but we also let them go free at the same time. That was the result of the Spanish-American War. On the question of Teddy as a father, a couple contrarian things come to mind. One, who would be the best historical model of a biography that we would read? who was a great father. In that, like, I don't know if the people who make history probably had the best family life.
Sure.
Yeah.
They were conquering the world in some fashion and offset that. Two, I do wonder, I think this probably wasn't true. I wonder if some of that, especially early child raising, was just solely the mother female role. You know, they weren't in the workplace at the time, and it was like, if you were gonna have kids and make a family, that
culturally,
like, fully fell on
culturally, I
their
don't think that
shoulders.
would have stood out. Yeah,
Right.
culturally, I
Yeah,
don't think that
so-
would have stood out for him at the time. So maybe
Like-
unfair criticism on that. But
Yeah, like I think you could even, like, I would say, like, Lincoln had like a lot of young kids and he was around a lot, and like seemed like they could play at his office, and you know, he was bringing them along. But he also, I mean, traveled the circuit and did a bunch of months long things without them.
yeah,
I have no idea if George Washington even had kids. I mean, I'm sure he did. It's like we don't know about the fatherly attributes of so many historical figures, even to start with. So I think
George Washington Carver. Where do you think he?
but yeah, and I don't bring that up just to pound the guy. I mean, I think overall an admirable figure, but I think what's interesting is he kind of I think he just more or less is it's an interesting lens with which to look at the question, like, what do kids need from their dads?
Right, correct.
You know what I
that's
mean?
fair. Yeah, that's the better.
Like, yeah, and I mean, I suppose you could put these on. I mean, I don't think these are diametrically opposed, but like, do they need a dad who is simply present, or do they need like an adventurous and noble role model? Yeah, like, what is it that kids need? And I think he's just a very interesting figure to contemplate on that. Just with some of these behaviors that, like, I think at first glance I'd be like, you did what? You know, but at the same time, I mean, I think there is something worthy in preserving like this sort of masculine edge, or that, you know, I know we talked about the dopey dad syndrome, you know, with being, just kind of stagnant in certain things. And he was anything but that, right?
Right.
Like, you can't accuse him of that. And
Yeah.
and there's some value to preserving that and to modeling something noble for your kids that
Right.
I think it's just interesting to consider. Not that nothing's perfect in this particular person or anyone else for that matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. That's a great question. Like, what is the adventurer, explorer, going off and being in the arena more important as a father figure, or more stable daily in-home presence? I think the case could be made. There's supporting evidence for both. Back to my earlier comment on, like, we live till 87 now, and that's so great, versus like the 60, dying at 60 or whatever. I do wonder if Teddy, like, is an embodiment. He goes and fights in the Spanish War, and he probably shouldn't have. He's probably one of the last of a few generations before. I just think death was probably seen differently. It's like, if you noble things, like, I just don't think they feared death because it was all around them all the time. It's like, we wake up tomorrow and there's 50 very real ways we could die tomorrow. We don't have that anymore, I don't think. Sure. And so there was more of a sense of, like, you know, go hard. I think go hard, be in the arena, maybe be a soldier if the cause is valiant and just, like, you know, go be brave.
You're
and
gonna
do it.
die for something worth
Yeah,
it.
and
worthy of
it's
Yeah.
just another mindset that I think Teddy clearly had that it's not. I don't think it exists anymore. It's like preserve and prolong versus like stick your neck out for anything. Again, I'm painting this in broad strokes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's something there, and yeah, he might be one of the last people to really embody it as boldly as he did. You know?
Yeah. Before we kind of battened down the hatches and became a pretty wealthy, well-off. Well, I don't know. 2 world wars were right around the corner here, so can't really say that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I had jotted down some thoughts on that. The antagonism between the present dad and the one who's doing the Teddy Roosevelt thing. I can say pretty honestly, the being present is more important. But, you know, the adventurous aspect is definitely still important, though. You know, I mean, a child, and I'm speaking of myself here. You guys can say yay or nay. You know, a child in a lot of ways, I think, is, as long as there's no, like, abuse or trauma going on, I think is naturally inclined to see both parents in positive terms. You know, it's like I remember taking a lot of pride in how just like physically strong and durable my dad was growing up. He didn't start running until I was more middle, early of grade school, but he could do a ton of push-ups, and, you know, he made a muscle. It looked like he had a big bicep and was tearing down barns, and fairly tall guy and skinny and lean. And yeah, I definitely took a lot of pride in that. So yeah, my dad wasn't going off and fighting in wars, but I never like gave second thought to that because he was adventurous in these other ways, and so it sort of fulfilled that desire that I had there, and that I tried to manifest in my own life, just for personal, you know, sort of ontological satisfaction, but also because I think it's. I take a lot of pride. I think everyone in our family does it well, of being like adventurous in those ways, and sort of has their own contributions there, and sort of creates a certain family character with that. On the like present side of things, it's like there's 2 aspects of that. Is one being physically present, like just are you home, and then 2, just how spiritually present, how present are you in the more just complex, rich nature of a person. And my dad was definitely on the side of being not super physically present. He traveled a ton, but that I never held against him at all. I don't think my siblings ever had any issue with it, for I tell. Like, I understood he had a job, that's how he made money. But you know, it's case with any dad. You know, there's certain challenge, or any parent, there's certain challenges, and in other ways, you know, though that lack of presence bothered me more than the physical kind. So
Sure.
That's how I would delineate those sort of three legs of the present stool.
Yeah, I think you're right. I agree with all of that. I think I think Teddy's probably the exception to a general rule that he is speaking to, but perhaps doesn't follow. And yeah, you climb the highest mountain, I think you can get away. I mean, he was a fairly well off. I think that what we don't have, he was a very good sacrificial aristocrat. Like, his kids were going to be fine. It seems like he clearly, when he was around 2 out of 12 months, he was all in.
Yeah.
But then,
for sure.
In those longer periods of adventure that rightfully so, I think he knew at the time he'd go down in the history books. Like, if you're about to be president, all that good stuff, like sticking your neck out for the republic, as he is doing here as a very privileged citizen, requires much more of you as an aristocrat or a king, which he clearly was for a short time.
Mike, you'll be happy to know that what you deduced on your own from just thinking, scientists spent thousands of dollars researching and came to the same conclusion as you. Namely that time or engagement, however they measured that in this particular study, was more important than time and co-residence, as they termed it. So you are, in fact, smarter than a scientist. You didn't need thousands of dollars to figure that out, Mike. So you're pretty good. But anyway, but yeah, maybe we'll kind of expand out. So we've been talking about the man, we've been talking about the critic, our personal lives, we talk about our family. We're going to spread things that take a little bit of a broader view here. What I know you guys both thought there's an excerpt about being a citizen of the world and citizen of the nation that you guys thought was particularly interesting, and I've got some thoughts on it too. But since you guys both commented on it, kind of independent of one another, yeah, I'm curious what if we can talk about some of that stuff and what stuck out to you about that part of the speech.
Yeah, I'll just read that part of the speech. I'm going in the middle of it, so I might have cut something off, but where's the first? So many long sentences. I believe that a man must be a good patriot before he can be, as the only possible way of being a good citizen of the world. Experience teaches us the average man who protests that his international feeling swamps is greater than his nation's feeling. He does not care for his country because he cares so much for mankind broadly. In actual practice, he proves himself a foe to mankind. That the man who says he does not care to be a citizen of any one country because he is a citizen of the world is in fact usually and exceedingly undesirable as a citizen of whatever corner of the world he's occupying at the moment. In the dim future of all moral needs and moral standards, as they may change at present, if a man can view his own country and all other countries basically with the same level of tepid indifference, it is wise to distrust him, just as it is wise to distrust the man who can take the same dispassionate view of his wife and mother. However broad and deep a man's sympathies are, however intense his activities, he need have no fear that they will be cramped by love of his native land. So Teddy does this part in a few places. I noticed he'll talk about being a soldier or a good citizen or being more aligned with your nation versus country. And he always kind of like dives down to comparing it to the relationship with the wife or the family, and then expanding back out from there, which I think is it's always a fairly good exercise to do. is just is a lot of ways the way you would be a father or kind of a protector, safekeeper of your house. Like that times 10 or 100 million is just an interesting way to view things. And so, yeah, you gotta love and be a good steward of the smallest place you're in. And if everybody does that, the natural outcome would be at least proud of where you're from, rather than not being proud of where you're from and kind of being useful to nobody or no nation. We'll stop.
Yeah, no, we've brought this up, like, I feel like almost in every other podcast maybe, but I think it's the Mother Teresa quote about, uh, God never, or Jesus never said to love humanity. He said to love your neighbor, or something. I'm probably butchering that, but loving humanity is easier than loving literally the person next to you, which is kind of what we're asked to do. And um, so, I mean, insofar as that's the case, I certainly agree with him. I mean, I think yeah, I guess I don't know, maybe he could be more charitable toward people with authentically, um, um, like mission oriented minds, and I think you would find something in common with them in terms of this like adventurous spirit to like go out into the world. And the gospel isn't made for just Europe or for just whatever, like let's bring it to Africa, to India, to China, um and kind of to the far places of the world, instead of just staying here where uh I mean, I think there is something valuable to the kind of citizen of the world-esque type of thing. I mean, I think there is something global about human dignity that does call to us that, I don't know, maybe he's not being super charitable too, but um, I think maybe the underlying thing, because he mentions this throughout the speech in a few different ways, but just he uses the word tepid and indifference to just describe the worst of the worst. like whoever he thinks is bad, that's kind of what he uses to describe them. Um, which, yeah, I mean, I think yeah, I mean, I think there is something, when I'm at my worst, I feel like that's how I am. I think that might be, yeah, the most concise way of describing how I think about that. Cause I think,
Just jotting down some notes here on this citizen question and globalism question. I mean, yeah, I think there is, a natural lean more towards, because it's getting at the idea of subsidiarity. If you focus on your small little area, your family, your community, then you put a bunch of those to get 100 million of those together. That's a great country. And I think Roosevelt is obviously famous for sort of being the father of the conservation movement in many ways, obviously with his friendship with John Muir there. But like I am genuinely curious how his attitude and demeanor would jive with obviously the political antagonism, particularly in the United States, like with climate change. Because like hypothetically, yeah, it could be resolved by communities taking responsibility, but it doesn't seem like it's going to. And I guess, and to be somewhat even-handed, like dealing also with countries with unstable governments, right? Like the United States has interest in, you can't make every government great goody two-shoes, but you do need to keep them stable so that nuclear weapons ultimately don't fall into the wrong hands. So yeah, how do you balance out those things?
Can you guys see my screen?
I've
Yeah,
heard of that
I
heat
do.
map.
Have you heard of it?
I've heard
it
of
basically,
it. I've
so,
never seen it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, so we're talking about mankind and loving your neighbor and family. I think this is a nature.com article, and I see it I see it all the time. But basically, like, to start out, I think like Peterson, some kind of psychologist would say like the leaning toward left, right, conservative, liberal is perhaps personality, psychological, deeper based than just like having conscientiousness. Yeah.
Openness,
So one way to describe it is
openness.
Like conservatives, I don't know if I'll get all the words right, but their heat map, their preference for what they think is most important is it's just like the family is where they think all their priorities, time, energy should be focused. And then with more liberal leaning people, the heat map is way further out from the family and towards things like living things. I mean, honestly, no offense, Mike, but like you just started talking about climate change, which like I never think about, but somehow you got there and like,
right. Because I mean, it's
right.
a thing.
So
like,
which would be more of like on the outer ring of concerns in this sort of graph. Is that fair to say? Yeah.
I think that is fair, but I think that is the type of thing that could easily make its way towards the inner rings. You know what I mean? So it is on the outer rings, but it's got potential to move
here's the thing, and I remember, I think, again, this is one of the lost podcasts. I don't remember what study it was, but there was some sort of, some sort of study or some sort of, litmus or something on, right? Because politics is basically about predicting the future, right? If this happens, then this will happen, right? And this sounds like way too off the cuff to not be able to reference the specific, but it was effectively like conservatives and liberals are equally capable of predicting the future. I don't know. Take it for what it's worth. But the thing is, I guess maybe a more apt way to put it, like why this dichotomy indoors, why we're talking about it and why Roosevelt was talking about it, is because it's true and it's real. Like, yeah, you do need to have the utmost concern for your family and your community. And you do need, they didn't know what the hell climate change was then, but there was still other global issues. I mean, they were about to have World War I happen. So I think the heat map, that's 100% true. And I do think a big problem with the world, and I made other notes in this, but I won't go into it now, but it's like trying to strain towards the other side as much as possible, I think is pretty critical. But
what do you mean by strain toward the other side?
Well, it gets into like other, I don't know, sort of digressing now, but I had made, what was the exact speech excerpt that I was referencing when I made these particular notes? Well, I don't see where I wrote it here, but I guess trying to dial in those conservative liberal lenses and that strain is like, why can't the liberals, leverage the abortion thing as like, abortion really affects minorities and we're supposed to really be a voice for them, defender of minorities. Right, exactly. And then with conservatives, It's like, oh, climate change is a thing, but hey, let's figure out a way to brand it at the state level or something like, oh, we're going to,
Local energy.
give some tax. Exactly. So exactly. 100%. Something like that. Like, so that's what I mean by
American-made energy.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Like, solar is domestic.
Yeah. I get what you're saying.
That's why RFK is where he's at. We're coming around. He's gonna fix it all.
Everything.
Kidding.
Do we want to go?
Well, no. There's in fairness, Art. There is a very positive opinion article in the Wall Street Journal about him, which I agree is like 80% of what he says is true, and I think there's a lot of wisdom to looking from that angle. So.
Are we thinking final bell at this stage?
Final bell.
Final bell.
Ding 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 ding.
I'll try to be Ross. All your strength, all the power, all the love,
all your strength, all your power, all your love. Come on, Mike.
Where is it? 15. One more round. There's no stopping this now. This is our round. Don't stop it now. We're starting. We don't stop. All your strength, all your power, all your love, everything you've got. This is your whole life here. Do it now.
Okay, and we're back. Matt, bring us home. What do we got?
All right, final bell question. So, we briefly alluded to it. We didn't get to go into it in depth. But if Teddy Roosevelt said work, to fight, and to have plenty of children are kind of these fundamental qualities, right? To be willing and able to work, to provide for your family and community, to be willing and able to fight and defend your country, and to be willing and able to have plenty of children are these fundamental qualities of a republic. What would a modern rendition of that look like? Possible answers for you guys. You could do a general modern rendition. You could do a Republican Party rendition, or you could do a Democratic Party rendition. I'll let you guys decide what you want to, how you want to answer it.
Very open. So many ways to go with that.
Hold on. Don't contaminate my thought. Give me one.
One more second.
I don't have fully. If I started talking, I'm not sure where I'll end up. But
okay, I might go first then.
Okay.
And give you I'll go first because I kind of thought about this a little bit ahead of time. So I'll give my general version of it. So instead of work, I think it would be spend. Instead of fight, it's relax and don't judge. And instead of have plenty of children, it is have only a convenient number of children if you want. # you do you.
Yeah, that is a very succinct. That is the modern take reality.
Maybe the reality. Yeah.
But it is real.
Yeah,
it is the message that is most promoted in explicit and inexplicit ways.
Yeah.
That is the defining nature of our society at the moment.
Yeah, and maybe that's a good way to contextualize that, because I could see. I mean, maybe this is making it more frustrating to come up with an answer, just making it broader. But yeah, I mean, I guess my version was a little more
no
cynical.
Politician would get up and say that, but I think
is kind of the
the
I think.
Advertisal or what's that weird word?
Just the general zeitgeist of
zeitgeist. Yeah, the general zeitgeist of. Yeah, that does nail it. I had in my notes, it didn't really relate, but you said spend, and I was trying to think of like the best replacement of the work part, and it is more Teddy talked in 1910. In the 1920s, a guy by the name of Edward Bernays basically invented advertising and public affairs, public relations as we know it. He was Sigmund Freud's nephew.
Interesting.
There's an absolutely fascinating 4 or 5 hour documentary that the BBC did 30 years ago. It's on YouTube. It's called The Century of the Self. And it basically kicks off right after a couple years after World War I, after Teddy's speech here, talking about how, and Teddy does get into it, in the individualism versus socialism. And he, I don't have the quotes up, but he does have even a couple lines in this speech about the dangers of pure individualism unchecked. And I think to the degree we can see that being played out over 100 years, just you do you and can be whatever you want to be. And there's no like any sort of speakable social expectations to like, well, maybe you should sacrifice for your family or community, or like not do all the things that you want. And that self versus community is almost flipped. Spending, Edward Bernays. So yeah, I think that what really happened right after this speech, what began to happen was we were citizens in 1910. We were citizens of a republic, and now we are most referred to as consumers in a society. You just never hear us referred to as citizens. It's like everything is more an economic and monetary label rather than a sort of, this is a government of ourselves, and we're not a citizen first, we're a consumer first. I don't need to belabor the point. So I think that, work to spend, brilliant. I really like that change of words. I think that nails it in a lot of different ways. Fight. Teddy had some good ways to talk about fighting and serving and just wars. I won't speak to right or left. I just think there's an anti, on one side, an anti-global, anti-police state. Well, both sides are kind of an anti-police state. One side is anti-global. The other one is anti-global, pro-national. I think that fighting is just, I would say the right is anti-global. The left would be pro-global, but also not pro-national. So I don't know how you'd align those up.
Sure.
And so, but the left would be anti-police state. The right, who cares what everyone's doing? Let's just focus on ourselves, nationalistic. And both of those equal kind of a likely retreat into like, why the heck are we fighting? Pull everyone back. Like, other people can beat each other up if they want. So I think fighting is just like, how do we not fight?
So not fighting,
regardless of the reason.
Sure.
And then have plenty of children. There were some interesting paragraphs on the child. Teddy really beats up people who don't have kids, and I don't think those paragraphs he spoke of there would go over well in modern discourse. He
not terribly
stringent. Yeah. And it is like, you look at Europe and any wealthy nation, like, you got to have 2.1 kids to just replace your own people. And every wealthy society is like barely above 1.5. And so, any value, or whether you're right and love Western civilization, or you're left and you love social justice, like he says in there, like, none of the ideals you are proud of your society will last a generation longer. They will all just go into the dust if you don't have kids. So I think that was just a prescient physical fact of the nature of people and humanity that we are especially probably ignoring from both sides. It's like neither right nor left is having enough kids to keep on whatever vision of the nation and the world that they adamantly believe in and probably freak out over. It's just like not going to matter if we don't do that. So I'll stop. But
What was the name of that documentary you mentioned?
Century of the Self.
Century of the Self. That's right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Might look into
very,
that.
very good.
Okay, I'll be really quick. I was not as tightly aligned as you guys were, but still got 3 things, just 3, so whatever. For the pubs and the libs. For the pubs, you seen it before, you seen it again. Vote Trump, have guns, love your country. The libs, I got plant a tree, borders aren't real, and love is love. There you go.
Succinct.
There you have it.
That's the stories.
Yeah, I think it captures things pretty well.
Okay, Land's gonna take us home with a final episode in a few weeks here, and excited to hear what it is. Do you have it picked out already?
Christmas time, pop open your classic American novel, East of Eden, Mr. Samuel Hamilton, the greatest literary father in Western literature. To be proven. We'll learn next month if that's the case, and his biblical struggles against the Cain and Abel forces in man's heart to wrap up this season.
Classic. Hey, thanks for drinking
and thinking
with us.
Hey, be safe out there, will ya? And have a happy Thanksgiving.
Dead ends come and go. Look toward the horizon. Up ahead you'll find a peace of mind, relief from the trying. I have burned a bridge, wrecked in a ditch, had to ask forgiveness. Dead ends come and go. Look toward the horizon. Oh, there are stories to tell. The times we grew and the times we fell.